this presentation, I will be sharing some perspectives on climate change and cultural heritage. I will invite you to think about why cultural heritage has an important part to play in the conversation about climate change, how change itself poses a risk to its conservation, and how it must be integral to the process of finding solutions and defining what it means to survive climate crisis. When using the word heritage, many people think first of these types of images: buildings in classic Rome or Greece, structures from long ago, opulent buildings and statues. People in the images are often visitors, but not necessarily owners or producers of those structures. Many of these places are considered so important that are listed as World Heritage, places that are of importance to all humanity, but which are selected only by a narrow and select group of individuals. However, not everyone thinks about the lives of common people when talking about heritage. We might not think of a fisherman, of small fragments of the past accumulated in the ground, of knowledge, of attitudes, of identity, of residents, of wide landscapes with their scents, winds, colors, sound, tastes, and temperatures. Of those places that are important and integral to people who might not have the power to make it to the select group of individuals that decide what heritage deserves to be included in the list of World Heritage Sites. However, all of this is also heritage, and it shapes if and how we are vulnerable to impacts from changed climatic and environmental conditions. But today, it is actually those communities, the ones that are disproportionately feeling the burden of climate impact. Who we are is shaped by our cultural identity, how we live, what we eat, what formal and informal systems of governance we live under or within, are all so important that we often take this element for granted as basic rights in our society and as basic needs for us individually. What that cultural identity also influences our shelter security, or how safe we are in the places where we live, our food security, or how able we are to supply our nutritional needs in culturally relevant ways, our access to water, our risks of exposure to pathogens, and of non-communicable and vector-borne diseases. All these, however, are linked to the decisions that those before us made, our parents, grandparents, other family members, great-grandparents, and so on, all of them within their own cultural identity and in their historical context. Therefore, our identity today has deep roots that are codified in traditional knowledge, in culturally relevant practices, written in history books and documents, or accumulated in archaeological records. All those processes, how we live, what we eat, how exposed we are, our health risks, our ability to support livelihood security in culturally relevant ways, all is affected by colonization and historical processes. Therefore, who we are and the challenges we face can be better understood in the context of the past. Who we will be can be better understood by exploring who we have been. However, both our ability to maintain our identity and recover the records of our ancestors are threatened by climate change. Archaeology has an important role to play because we can recover the material evidence about people beyond what is written in history books. We can recover through careful analysis of archaeological sites a whole library of books written in the land that have never been read. Archaeology studies human behavior and decision-making through the analysis of material culture, of tangible remains of the past that retain information about the intangible social world that they were part of. There is a limit to how much we can see, given that the accumulation and continuity of activities blur details. We often cannot see a single individual, but we can talk about communities at different scales, depending on how detailed is our excavation process and our observations. We can then tie the record of human behavior from sites with the record of climate and environmental change using time, that is, carefully reconstructing what happened when, and so that we can then explore how was life before, during, and after events. Change can occur slowly or quickly. Slow onset change includes sea level rise, droughts, fast, etc., and fast onset change includes high magnitude storms like Maria or Ida, earthquakes or tsunamis. How people respond depends on their perception of risks, and that is shaped by their worldviews, which are based on their culture and their cultural heritage. In archaeology, we can explore social continuity or social crisis by exploring settlement patterns and food practices as part of livelihood security in the past. That is why archaeology and heritage have such an important part to play in the conversation about climate change. We can help understand what does it mean to survive sudden or slow onset change. We can contribute to or even lead the conversation about the challenges that our societies face today. I do not have a clear answer to this question, what does it mean to survive climate change? But archaeology suggests that when people can continue their identity after change, we consider them to having been successful at surviving change. In my work, I use this idea to understand how our ancestors in Puerto Rico have experienced changes in the past. For example, we know that between the years 800 and 1100 of this era, the Caribbean islands saw a spike in high-magnitude storms and sudden floods. Some of these events impacted settlements and are recorded in the sediments of now archaeological sites, such as Tibes or Viví in Puerto Rico. In Tibes, we can see the archaeology that the flood in Tibes, we can see that the archaeology that the flood impacted the site, and that magnitude of flood had not been experienced before. There was no traditional knowledge of such high magnitude impact. The flood caused death and destruction. Human remains were found by the project director, Dr. Antonio Curet, in the excavations that identified the flood event. However, even after knowing that that they were at risk of another high magnitude flood, the site was not abandoned, but reorganized and restructured. In Viví, floods also impacted the site. There is evidence of previous events, but of less magnitude. In this case, the site was not abandoned, either after repeated flooding, but the residents conducted a ceremonial death to their ceremonial batey structure and remained in place. These archaeological examples suggest that social priorities are more relevant to communities that natural hazards threatening shelter security. Identity has strong links to place, and when seen in context, the place is more important than hazard. Therefore, risks can be considered acceptable, and people prefer to stay in their places in spite of knowing potential hazards related to their chosen locations. We also see transfer of knowledge across generations as people adjust and respond more efficiently to recurrent impacts. In the present, these statements need to be considered in the context of historical processes and current political characteristics and colonial processes, because there are marginalized communities that have been displaced and pushed to live in locations that are disproportionately hazardous. Their places have been used as dumping grounds for hazardous materials or other situations. In all cases, identity of a community is strongly linked to place, and it is important to negotiate this when thinking of culturally relevant solutions to climate risks. Heritage, art, historical buildings, and archives all have important roles to play in the recovery after crisis. In Puerto Rico, this was seen immediately after Hurricane Maria and the earthquakes that followed, as people started sharing historical documents as memory of us having survived these challenges before, or using historic water tanks to supply their needs for water when there was no running water service. Heritage has an important part to play in the responses to crisis and in recovery after disasters. However, the process of climate change is also impacting the same heritage that we are trying to save and learn from. Archaeological sites are washing away, coastal heritage is flooding at high tide, landscapes are being transformed, elders are passing away, communities are disintegrating as individuals migrate. We are losing heritage faster than we can learn from it. ICOMOS recently published, ICOMOS is the Council of Monuments and Sites, recently published a document summarizing how to engage cultural heritage in climate action. In it, it details how climate drivers, such as the ones listed here for coastal Puerto Rico, can impact different aspects of cultural heritage. For example, increased temperatures can impact museums and collections, archaeological resources, buildings, structures, cultural landscapes, including urban and submerged landscapes, associated and traditional communities, and intangible cultural heritage in many different ways, from increased chemical decay and HVAC needs in museums to more pests in buildings, micro-cracking of archaeological remains, loss of food security, loss of culturally relevant species and local knowledge, less practice of traditional activities, and so on. And this is a single variable. The same analysis was done for many other variables. This document is highly relevant and useful, and I recommend any interested person to find it and use it. The scenario of climate change is and the potential impacts on heritage is grim, and heritage is highly at risk. But because it has such an important part to play in identity, resident and generational communities are eager to help. Heritage can stimulate strong and long-lived climate action, inspiring us to find locally and culturally relevant mitigation and adaptation strategies, and helping us define how we want to survive climate change. These types of community-based projects will not stop climate change. We really need accountability from governance systems and more targeted climate action at that governmental and higher level. But it is helping these locally based projects are helping us recover and find ways to support communities through art, ecology, geomorphology, archaeology, and citizen science. There is still much to do, but these are reasons to celebrate ground-up conservation efforts.